This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Today, we're celebrating traditional Ho-Chunk artifacts and wood carving practices. Dane County Parks received a very special canoe from the Ho-Chunk Nation, and the Harry Whitehorse International Wood Sculpture Fest was a smash. We're going to talk about it. We're also bringing back our episode from earlier this year with Wisconsin maritime archaeologist Tamara Thompson, who is part of the incredible discovery of 16 ancient canoes in Lake Mendota. Our archaeological record has never been the same. Joining me today to talk about it is our producer, Jedi Siri Ramos. Hey, girl, hey.
I am so excited to talk to you about canoes today, Bianca.
Yeah, it is the vibe. It is the moment. And last week, as mentioned, Dane County received a gift of a dugout canoe from the Ho-Chunk Nation. Jade, what are the details here?
Yeah, so Bill Quackenbush, the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin, gifted Dane County Parks a handmade dugout canoe. Now, Bill himself crafted this canoe out of a cottonwood tree that was removed from McDaniel Park during the construction of the Lower Yahara River Trail. And Dane County Parks will work with the Ho-Chunk Nation on storage and display so that the canoe can be available for the public to view while also being available for the nation to use for education and cultural events. And they have been using this canoe for the last several years. I've seen Bill himself out toting this canoe behind him. And I've seen it specifically at Penny Library, and I've always been so intrigued. It's a beautiful piece of work. And as I was getting ready for this story, Bianca, I was thinking about you because I know that you just went to the Harry Whitehorse International Wood Sculpture Festival over at San Damiano. And I feel like you probably have some thoughts right now about the art of wood carving.
Yeah, I have so much joy and spirit in my heart after stopping by the Harry Whitehorse International Wood Sculpture Festival. If you went this year, if you've gone in previous years, you know what I just found out. It's incredible. Like, it is an incredible, in its name, international art display where basically for a series of days, artists from all over the world, from Poland, from the Czech Republic, from Costa Rica, from New Mexico, that counts our country, and some Madison sculptors, are basically working along Lake Monona doing traditional wood carving and making these knockout pieces. Like, I was really moved by just the honoring of this ancient practice. They also had live music playing, like a stage that brought a lot of people. There were multiple food trucks, and San Damiano was alive. And something that's really neat is the Madison-based wood sculptor Gene Delacourt, that's the festival's founder. He had a station, and his piece was depicting a Native American woman dancing with their kind of dressed with their arms up, this sort of tilted look and outfit where your arms, they mimic a butterfly, and that's intentional. And it was just a real ode to the spirit of like respecting our land and how we're connected with nature and animals. One of the standout pieces was from an artist from France. His name was Olivier Delobel. He did like a huge bear who was hugging a mouse. And it was very cute. There were a lot of human figures just in motion, which is so cool in sculpture. You know, it's hard to describe on a podcast. I talked to a few people, like meeting folks' friends, and just it was a very community-oriented space. And it felt like there was a lot of gratitude to be together and around this amazing art form.
It's also just like incredible how they're able to sort of, because it's carving, they're like uncovering this thing within their wood, right? And I think it's different than building up. Like carving away is such a beautiful practice and really cool. And I am sad to have missed it this year, but I know next year I gotta put it on my calendar because I gotta go.
Yeah, and it was neat. It like smelled really good. I was like, why does it smell so good? I think it was the wood. It literally was the wood carvings, and it was the different kind of wood. So I appreciate you talking about the canoe and that it was a cottonwood. It was a gorgeous experience. So just the biggest shout out to that festival. Let's pivot back to the canoe. What does Bill Quackenbush have to say about the cultural significance of a dugout canoe?
According to Channel 3000, who had a reporter present at the press conference last week, Bill said that the canoe reflects the history of Ho-Chunk ancestors who returned to Wisconsin in dugout canoes. Now, the Ho-Chunk Nation has a rich and long history here in Dejope, or what we call Madison. According to their oral tradition, they have always lived here and will always live here, even despite forceful removal attempts by the U.S. government. In a way, the canoes represent that connection to the ancestral lifelines, preserving the old ways in this new day and age, and really connecting modern tribal members to their traditional hunting and fishing practices, and even traveling from one side of the lake to the other or through the chain of lakes here in Madison.
I love it. It really is still alive, and I really appreciate it's that sort of, cross-cultural exchange that is righteous. Like really connecting with the fact that, this land is now shared by all these folks, and hey, you could get into this wood carving practice as well. You can honor the canoes in these spaces. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I've got the itch to start building a canoe myself. Me and my partner, we have a wood carving canoe book specifically, and I've been talking about it and getting tools, and all of this activity here in Madison makes me want to be connected to just traditional ways of interacting with the lake and each other.
And slow practices, there's you could go to REI right now and buy yourself a canoe, but the idea of finding the tree that would make the canoe for you guys and have a story behind it, and the slow practice of carving intentionally out the space for you to sit, I think is beautiful. And I hope you do that.
Yeah, and go away with plastics. Connect with the older practices. I love it. This is so exciting. When I hear you say that, I'm just reminded of the ancient Indigenous canoes discovered in Lake Mendota in recent years. I spoke with Wisconsin maritime archaeologist Tamara Thompson earlier this year about those discoveries, and we have to bring that conversation back, right, Jade? This is the time.
It's one of my favorite interviews this year so far.
All right. Well, with no further ado, y'all find out about those ancient canoes that were found, and well, soon, next year, I believe, in the conversation, some of them will be on display downtown Madison. But you have to listen to the interview to find out more.
Hi, I'm David Plotz. I'm the CEO of CityCast, a podcast network that includes this show you're listening to, and also 12 other CityCasts in 12 other cities. And each one knows their city as well as your local team knows yours. So isn't it time we connected them? Don't you want to know how they're tackling their bike lane problems and housing challenges and sidewalk dog poop crises? That's why I'm hosting a new podcast called Your City Could Be Better. Because it could be. Every week, I'll chat with a different host in our CityCast network about what their cities are doing right and wrong, the weird things they're trying, and the surprising successes, so that we can all learn how to make our cities a little bit better. Listen to Your City Could Be Better on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Tamara, welcome to CityCast Madison.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so in November, you made headlines with the announcement that 16 ancient Indigenous canoes had been discovered at the bottom of Lake Mendota. That was you. Help put that into context. How big of a deal was that find?
So we have been working on canoes since 2018. Looking at canoes throughout the state. We had an undergraduate student that worked with us. We were looking at canoes in collections. And so I've been in a lot of museums and people's basements looking at dugout canoes that had been recovered. But in 2021, I was out on a recreational dive with Mallory Draw, another girl from the dive shop, just on a Saturday afternoon. We were off the village of Shorewood Hills, and we had scooters, these great big propulsion vehicles. There's a big battery pack with a fan, and we were scooting along and picking up trash as we went along. And where she stopped, she was halfway through her air supply, and she stopped and signaled she needed to turn around. And where she stopped, she was above the exposed end of a dugout canoe. But I had seen so many of them in this study that we had been involved with that I knew exactly what it was. So I pulled out my Right in the Rain notebook and I told her, hey, that's a dugout canoe. And she said, yeah, but I'm halfway through my gas supply. I have to go back to the boat. So I went back to the boat and I started thinking, was that actually a dugout canoe? Am I just seeing these in my sleep, And I asked Amy Roseborough, who's now the state archaeologist, to go out with me and sit on the boat that afternoon while I went and tried to re-find it again. And it turned out to be a dugout canoe. And it was in such good shape that we placed bets about how old it was going to be. And I was betting Boy Scout canoe for sure. And when it came back as 1,200 years old, I lost the bet, but I thought they were wrong, right? So I was like, yeah, that just can't be. There's some sort of error at the lab. And it turned out to be real. And those are connected to, the effigy mounds that are surrounding the lakes. It made this very clear picture of the people that we know that are here. They're, settling and making these effigy mounds everywhere. And this canoe kind of fit in with the story. And then the next year, I was out with a student. I teach scuba diving as well. We were on the same area, swimming around, putting some time underwater on some new equipment. And his name was Casey Klaus. It is Casey Klaus. And we stumbled across two more dugout canoes. One was 3,000 years old, one sitting right next to it, 2,000 years old.
Wow.
That fall, the 3,000-year-old canoe, again, we consulted with the tribes. It was decided that that canoe should be brought up. When we brought it up, underneath it was a 4,500-year-old canoe buried under the 3,000-year-old canoe. And that led us to really look in the area and see what other ones were there. And so then it was another 4,500-year-old canoe, one that was, a little bit more modern, 4,000-year-old canoe. And we worked our way up to 7 canoes that were underwater.
Wow.
All of them have been left in place except for the two, canoe 1 and 2, that were brought up, the 1,200-year-old and the 3,000-year-old canoe. But when we removed those 2 canoes, we were also told to bring up anything that looked like worked wood. So, these canoes are made by felling trees with fire, scraping and controlling the burn in order to shape the canoe and hollow out the inside. So anything that looked like it had been worked in that process or burned, we brought up. So there were several other sort of random pieces that were brought up and put in the conservation tank.
Wow. So it's like sheer luck that you landed on this. How long have you been doing maritime archaeology in Wisconsin? Was this the biggest discovery during your time?
Yeah, I work on shipwrecks, and the wood is very different. The history is very different. This seems like one of the most important things that's happened, and it's really an honor to work along with the tribes to understand this history.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I feel like some context of how big is this?
Yeah, I wanted to tell you that, again, it's not just that I found 16 this spring. It's this evolution of the process in that, there were the ones that are in the tank we evaluated. Those ended up being 3 individuals, moving our number up to 10. And then this spring, there were 6 more that were discovered. So, and the oldest one amongst those 6 is 5,200 years old. So it's a longer story than anybody really wants to hear, I guess. So
No, I mean, it's just so exciting that it's hard not to jump in and be like, oh my God, this seems like a really big deal. Of course, it made headlines, but what sort of impact can a discovery like this have? And what has it had? What's happened since you guys have been finding this incredible history?
Yeah, so to put it in perspective, if you take the oldest canoes in Eastern North America and we look at the top 10 of those, half of those are in Lake Mendota. So There's only 2 canoes that are older that are from the state of Florida that are older than those that are in this assemblage. So it's a pretty big deal. Does that mean that there's not older ones out there? No, there probably are. Cecil Schrader, my collaborator in this research over at the UW-Madison, has looked at core samples that were taken in the 70s and reevaluated some of those. They looked at pollen and seeds that were found in those. And it's estimated that there was a prolonged drought that was occurring from about 7,000 years ago to about 1,000 years ago. And that's when these canoes were deposited. And so where they are now in 24 feet of water, that was about 3 or 4 feet deep along the edge of an ancient shoreline. And we can see also from these canoes a lot about climate change over time, because the wood that they've selected and the wood choices that they made over that millennia also changed. But the practices of making dugout canoes really remain the same throughout that whole period.
For reference, do y'all have like a tip line if people think they've stumbled on something important in our lakes?
Yeah, so we know of 120 canoes that have been discovered in Wisconsin water. Some of them have been removed, some of them are still underwater. And we've gone and tried to make an effort to see all of them and to collect a small wood sample. And the same tip line works for anyone throughout the state that may come across your podcast too, is that if you know of a dugout canoe, report it to state archaeologist at wisconsinhistory.org, and that gets routed to me.
That is so exciting. I mean, and like you said, these were dugout canoes, old school, not like the ones that you can find at REI, wooden. You've shared a little bit, but how did you date the canoes? Like, what does that process look like?
So for each one of the canoes, we take a small sample about the size of your pinky fingernail. And that sample is split into one half goes to the Forest Products Lab on the west side of the UW campus for wood type analysis. So they identify what wood species, the taxa, these things were made out of. And then the other half goes to a laboratory where radiocarbon dating is performed. And so there's a range of ages and probabilities as to how old the wood was. And where we take the sample is from the outside of the canoe. So if you took it from the inside, that would give you false information about maybe when the tree started growing. But when you take it from the outside, that's closer to the proximity of what era the tree was harvested in.
That was one of my favorite things learning about when I took an archaeology class at UW, dendrochronology, which is not exactly the same thing, but like tree rings and dating. One of the other most exciting components of this discovery is y'all worked with preservation officers with the Ho-Chunk Nation and the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa to understand the historical context. Like you said, there are effigy mounds like all around the lake. Can you talk about, what did you learn from that partnership and the contributions that were made from that?
Yeah, our partnership is really baked into the entire process. So when the original discoveries were made, the tribes were notified with the decisions to bring the canoes up and when and how that happened. Everyone was consulted about this. And now going forward, when we're leaving the canoes in place, what that tells us and things that we can learn, we're learning together.
The canoes that you're leaving in place, because you didn't take all of them up, you said. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so there's a number of canoes that were left in Lake Mendota. We're not bringing any more up. Conservation and preservation takes a lot of time and money. Also, you need a place to store a big object like that in perpetuity. So it's been decided that the canoes will tell a bigger story when they're left in place. And part of that story is that they're parked along an ancient shoreline. Why are they all in this area? It's probably because of their proximity to the trail network that went throughout this region, north, south, east, west. And the area that they're parked in really corresponds to areas that are adjacent to ravines. Like if we went out and we stood on the ice on Lake Mendota right over the canoe site and we looked back at the shoreline, there would be a 35-foot bluff there. And when you look at that bluff, there are some cuts through that, some ravines. And the areas, the groupings of canoes are lined up with some of those ravines, probably so that they could find them again, but also so that it would make an easy transition from water to walking to get to some of these sites. Because remember, there was a prolonged drought and the four lakes were not flowing at that time. The Yahara River wasn't practical to paddle throughout.
Gosh, there's so much you can learn from the canoes. And I know a lot of folks would be excited if they can view them. Can folks view the recovered canoes?
The two recovered canoes are in conservation right now. So they've been taken back to the State Archive Preservation Facility, where over the last 3 or 4 years, they've been in circulated water. That's removed a lot of the invasive species. We have invasive species in Lake Mendota. So we have zebra mussels, and there's also other little algae and things that adhere to the wood. So all of that has been filtered away. And then after that, we've started polyethylene glycol treatment. So what that is it's a bulking agent. So if you think of wood and wood structure, waterlogged wood, the only thing that's holding it in its shape is the water that's in the cells. But as that dries off, the wood, then the cells would collapse. And so that wouldn't allow it to hold its shape, and it wouldn't be kind of shelf stable. You wouldn't be able to handle it. So we soak it in this polyethylene glycol, which is the same. I mean, it's food grade. It's in Skittles, and it's in a lot of medications
That
and
makes
vaccines.
sense. That tracks.
So it's kind of like waxy.
Yeah.
And what that does is that displaces the water in the cellular structure, and it bulks up the wood so that it's stable. So we're going to get that to about 85% displacement. And then at that point, it gets sent by a fine art shipper to Texas, where there's a conservation lab there, which will do some freeze drying and remove the rest of the water from the canoes. So once that's done, they will go on display at the new State History Center, which is scheduled to open in the fall of 2027. So the big hole that's on the Capitol Square, that's where it will be.
Right downtown. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. That is huge. And I guess, you mentioned that you've also do work, shipwrecks in the Great Lakes. And I want to talk about that. But before we move on, like, what is the next chapter for, what this big discovery has sparked?
We're looking at it as far as landscape. Again, where were they going? Why were they going there? If they're parking their canoes here, is there an adjacent parking lot? We're looking to Lake Wingra. Would they have been going there? That was an important sacred site, very spiritual for the people of the time because of all the springs that were on it. Is there an adjacent parking lot there? And in other lakes around the region, is there any kind of predictable model that we can look at to be able to predict where these canoes might have been left and if they're still there today?
So there's more work to be done, more adventure and exploring. Do you have any thought about anything else that might be hiding in our lakes?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on the bottom of our 4 lakes here. For a number of years, I've worked with a fisherman named Rick Krieger. And when he retired, gosh, it has to be 10 years ago, he bought himself a side scan sonar and he started gridding out the 4 lakes area, looking for objects that were on the bottom. And I think he's over 70 vessels that he's found abandoned. So as far as important research, we could understand some of these small boat makers and really the evolution of man's use of the 4 lakes through the boats that were abandoned on the bottom. There's milk wagons that are on the bottom, and there's ice boats, and there's all sorts of things that you can learn from what's on the bottom of the lakes.
Oh my gosh. It is seriously like there's a childlike wonder there. It's just like, it seems like you have the coolest job. And I do want to ask you about your work as a whole, because you are one of 2 statewide maritime archaeologists. What's that job like? Like, what's the range of projects that you're working on?
I've been in this job for 22 years, and we work in a number of capacities. Mostly, we work with shipwrecks on Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, but also on any of the inland waterways, navigable waterways, rivers, and sometimes a little bit larger lakes. We've looked at inundated fur sites. We've looked at indigenous fish weirs.
What's a fish weir? I should know, but...
In ancient times, they would have put stones across the river to try to divert fish into nets.
Sure.
So, yeah, and try to control the water a little bit better. And we've also looked at mining sites, flooded mines. That's dependent upon the value of the ore. If it wasn't profitable for them to keep the mine open and run the pumps, they shut it down. And a lot of times those are like time capsules. So we've been a lot of places, but it's primarily shipwrecks and primarily on Lake Michigan and Lake Superior.
Yeah, the Great Lakes are tremendous. I want to shout out, a few years ago, I produced a National Geographic podcast about shipwrecks from the transatlantic slave trade called Into the Depths. And it won some awards, so I highly recommend folks go back and listen. But really, one of the coolest aspects of the podcast was the hope to bring to life the process of maritime archaeology. So the scuba diving, doing field work, research, using tools like sonar, magnetometers, How do you say
magnetometer? Yeah.
magnetometers. Lots of big words, but cool stuff, right? And Wisconsin, like we basically border two seas that we call the Great Lakes. There's so much to discover there. And me and my partner have made it kind of a mission to visit all the lighthouses along Lake Superior and Lake Michigan. And the repeated chorus there at each stop is like, the power of the Great Lakes are tremendous. Cue the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, you know? So can you talk about what's the state of shipwrecks in Wisconsin's portion of Lake Michigan? Because she's wild.
Yeah, we've had a number of new discoveries. So it used to be that governmental agencies were the ones that were discovering shipwrecks. Anymore, it's fishermen. And we had, a father-daughter. She was only 4 that discovered a shipwreck while out fishing. We had a 22-year-old this last year that found an entire ship graveyard. So the Manitowoc Shipbuilding Company, when ships became unviable and they couldn't fix them any longer, they would bring the town together, have a huge party. People would stand along the shore and watch them sink a ship offshore. And we've kind of forgotten where a lot of those are. So he found 13 different ships that were off the coast of Manitowoc in this ship graveyard, just because the sand has moved around so much because of the intensity of the storms increasing there. And the other people that are finding them are using technology like Google Earth. So using satellite imagery and what's called green LiDAR to be able to look down through the water and see structure. So we had a gentleman that owns a tourist company out of Door County named Matt Olson, and he likes to take his clientele out to new places to see by kayak or to snorkel on or to look over the edge of his boat. So he's found, I think he found 6 or 7 shipwrecks this last spring. And so we're, again, in a backlog situation, getting out to all of these to examine them to see what remains are there and what cultural items might still be there, things that were taken aboard by the captain and crew and went down with the ship.
Oh my gosh, there's so much history. And I feel like I saw an article just talking about how the Great Lakes actually might be more dangerous than the ocean. What's that about?
Yeah, so the intensity of the waves and the period of the waves is much different than the ocean. So it puts additional stresses on the vessels. Plus, we didn't have a lot of resources here early, and so there was a lot of shipping going on without a lot of the shoals being charted. And so that caused a lot of shipwrecks as well. There's a lot of disadvantages for the mariners at the time, and therefore there's a lot of shipwrecks. In fact, in Wisconsin waters, we have cataloged 780 shipwrecks, commercial vessels that had been lost in our waters alone.
Okay, well, before I let you go, I want to ask, what's the wildest thing you have found on a dive?
So everybody says, what things have you brought up or what things have you found? And to be absolutely honest, outside of the 2 canoes that were brought up, and we've already talked about those, there was what's called a mast step coin. So this was in 2015. We had an intern that was working for us from New Zealand named Matt Carter. And he learned archaeology in Australia. And so everything that kind of sparkled in the water was a shark, and it was going to come to eat him. We all know.
Oh my gosh.
It's very easily
Don't
startled.
Don't the sparkle in Australia.
So very, very easily startled. And we have a crew of volunteers that work with us, regular people that we've had for many, many years come and help us on these surveys. And they discovered that too. And so they brought handfuls of change. And as we were going out to the shipwreck site, because this was offshore of Jacksonport, Wisconsin, up in Door County. And as we were swimming out to the shipwreck, they took pennies and were dropping them down on him. So they would kind of flit through the water and he would jump out of his skin.
Oh
so
my God.
By the end of the survey, it's like cruelty, right? But by the end of the survey, the site was completely covered with pennies and nickels and dimes. So at the end, we do a sweep and we clean up pencils and rulers and stuff that we've left out on the site to make sure everything is clean as we leave. And so I spend a lot of time picking up all of the change. And I noticed that one of the coins that I picked up toward the center part of the ship was a little bit older, and my dad collected coins. And so I said to the volunteer that was going through the bags and sorting everything, I said, hey, you can distribute the change however you want. But there's an older coin in there. I thought it was like a hay penny or something, I said, can you give that to me? Because I'm going to give it to my dad. He probably already has it, but then at least he'll know that I'm thinking of him. And so he found the coin. He came up and he's like, this isn't just an old penny. This is an 1843 seated Liberty dime. It was a silver dime. And so the tradition for shipbuilders was that as you were constructing your ship and you'd laid down your keelson and you built the ship all around, one of the last things you'd do is step your mast, stand them up. And before that last mast was set, they would take a coin of the year of construction of the ship, and they would throw it into the step, and then they would set the mast for good luck. And so we didn't know the name of the ship, right? So because it was very common length and very common build, and there were a number of them that were pretty similar that were lost in the area. And so that allowed us to sort of pin the name on the shipwreck because it had been built in 1843. And so we were able to discover that the name of the ship was the Annie Doll.
The Annie Doll. That is one lucky coin. And that is a very good story. So I'm so glad that I asked. Honestly, to the woman with the coolest job in the state, this has been super informative and super interesting and just so cool to talk to you. And you found such incredible stuff for our history and our community. So I just want to say thank you. And thank you for taking the time to come on CityCast Madison. And we really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That's Tamara Thompson, Wisconsin maritime archaeologist. And have you voted for us in the 2026 Best of Madison competition yet? Madison Magazine's yearly competition. You've nominated us. Now help us win. What are you waiting for? We're in the running for Best Local Podcast and Best Local News Website. If you already have, thank you. For those of you that want to get your vote in, polls are open through the end of this month, which is soon. And we'd really appreciate the support. You can find a link to the voting in our show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm your host, Bianca Martin. Don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor. Head to our website, madison.citycast.fm, and click on that membership tab from the sidebar. And if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this episode with someone who likes to kick it old school, slow down, fall in love. All right, y'all. Also, if you could help spread the word about CityCast Madison far and wide, it really makes a difference for folks finding our show. We want to grow our squad, so share this link out, please. And we will be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care, and thanks for listening.